Good morning, grasshoppers. This week, week 3 of our logic class is going to involve a lot of reading for you. Couple of exercises, but mostly what I want you to do is just to get a good overview of the things that we're going to be chatting about. These will come into play in another week or so, but so we're going to start on page 59. I'm just going to run through some of this with you. Argument forms proving invalidity. Now, argument forms are going to be very important later when we get into truth functions and deductions. And what I find myself doing as I'm going through the text with you is I immediately see the argument forms and recognize the fallacies or the invalidity or validity of those forms. So I want you to pay attention to this notion of form. It's really going to come in handy for you later and down the road. When you're out of this class, what I want you to be able to recognize is that when folks are arguing with you, you're able to identify their form of validity or invalidity as they're chatting with you. And this particular section from 159 are really getting into what are called syllogisms. And a syllogism is Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. That's a syllogism. And so we're using those forms, and they want to introduce you to, if you have an argument form, you can use a substitution method to show if it's valid or invalid. And they give lots of great examples of that in the text. So all A are B, I'm on page 60. All A are B, all C are A, therefore all C are B. And you can look at the substitution instance of all sporting events are engaging pastimes. All baseball games are sporting events, therefore a baseball game is an engaging pastime. Now, over on page 61, they're giving you a substitution instance, and I want you to just look at the diagram at the top of the page. This comes from a study that we don't have the time to really go into this. It's called Venn diagrams. And it's in your textbook, and you are certainly encouraged to go through and read that on your own. And what it just gives you is an example of how the substitution variables may come into play. So all A are B, all C are B, therefore all A are C. The substitution is all cats are animals, all dogs are animals, which in the diagram are the two circles. Therefore, all cats are dogs. And you can see, of course, that that's very problematic, because it says in the circles gives all cats, all dogs, and they are in the category of all animals, but they are not the same thing. So it's just a logical mechanism of you quickly with your little notepad, for example, of just delineating and making a substitution in, for some of these argument forms. And I think this chapter is just very, very good in terms of sorting that out for you. The counterexample method, a substitution instance, I'm on page 62. A substitution instance having true premises and a false conclusion, like the cats and dogs example, is called a counterexample. And so you can read through some of the counterexamples that they afford you here. But I like the notion of where your text is sharing, try to substitute easy terms that are universal. Cats, dogs, animals, fish, things of that nature. Those are universal terms. And you can quickly and easily substitute those terms in your counterexample to prove validity or invalidity of an argument. I circled on page, 63. Um, the argument that's in the middle of the page, the argument is invalid because the price of automobiles, blah, blah, blah. But they're giving you if G, then P, not G, therefore not P. Now, down the road, we'll be coming across this argument. It's called the fallacy of denying the antecedent. And I just wanted to share that with you, that down the road, this form is going to be very important for you. And you're going to want to know that. So the on page 64, they're giving you some helpful insights here in terms of how to write out these. And it says always write the premises first and the conclusion last. Remember that all arguments are conditional statements. If A is the case, then B is the case. Now, A can be as complex as we want, but the conclusion is necessarily must follow from the premises. And that is, once again, one of the things that I just want to have you emblazon in your mind so that we don't have any confusion about that. All arguments are conditional statements. And you want to start thinking that way. And so, in any event, the exercises that I've afforded you here, exercise 1.5, do questions 1 through 7, are just practice for you. You'll notice, for example, that in chapter 2, I actually went through and did the assignments and afforded you the answers for at least the papers that I was grading today. And you can look at those. What I'm interested in at this point is not to sort of beat you up about, well, you got number 2 wrong and that kind of stuff, as much as I want you to just be familiar with the importance of understanding language and how your language is able to trick you up. And so you want to be very clear in terms of how you're using language and the implications of language. It will make you an infinitely better communicator and implementing or employing the logic that you're learning. But this first section is really about just familiarizing you with the challenges and difficulties of language and how we use it. So that's where I want to take you in this first section. Extended arguments on page 67 is just another format for how you can delineate arguments. And you have horizontal and vertical structures that you can use. Your textbook is very clear on that in terms of how those operate. And some of it gets a little complicated. You look on page 71, for example, you can have multifaceted premises coming down into a 2-part conclusion, for example, and how they're all supporting. That's what these diagrams are trying to show you. When you're looking at longer essays or articles in the newspaper, this particular method becomes very helpful. You can have your pencil or whatever, and you can just start writing down or circling positions in the article, which they're going to have you do in, I think, exercise 2.1. So that's just what I want you to see there. And then there's your summary. Now we're going to get into chapter 2 on page 81, and language, meaning, and definition. For our purpose, two linguistic functions are particularly important: to convey information and to express or evoke feelings. This is such a distinction because in many instances folks will confuse the two, such that a statement that is designed to evoke feelings are translated as matters of fact, and that can be very problematic. So as you're reading through this, a value claim is a claim that something is good, bad, right, wrong, better, worse, whatever. Those are value structures or emotive types of things. Something that's good or bad, of course, is premised on what's the definition of good or bad. And so I just want you to read through this particular section carefully. And on page 86, we're going to just have you do exercise 2.1, just the first one there. So it says do number 1 on our buddy George Wallace, who is way before your time, but he is in my time. And so I remember George Wallace and the hullabaloo and the just, you'll see some of the crazy stuff he had to say. But it's a good opportunity for you to go through this editorial and sort some of this stuff out. On page 92, the extension and extension of terms. Here we have connotational and denotational. Again, I just want you to be familiar with these terms. I didn't have you go through and write them all out again, but as you're reading through this, make sure that you're familiar with the intentional meaning and extensional meaning of terms. The intentional consists of the qualities or attributes that the term connotes, and the extensional meaning or extension consists of the term cat, members of the class that the term denotes. Sounds very confusing, but you'll be able to read through this, and I want you to go through it slow and just make sure that you have a clear idea in your head what the denotational and connotational notes are, for these particular terms. And let's see, definitions and their purposes. And read this over, and again, it's pretty clear. And then I've got you doing exercises 2.3 on page 104. So you're only doing the first 5 of those. Again, I want to share with you that this, where we're going, this language stuff, sometimes can be very difficult because folks are not used to doing this. They're not used to sitting down with a statement and actually ferreting out the terms. I noticed in your assignment, for this past week, one of them had to do with the Empire State Building and the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty. And if you are not familiar with those structures, you have to go and look up the sizes. So the that can be problematic. The Because most folks are too lazy to do that. They don't want to actually go and look up the information so that they can make sound decisions or clear decisions on the efficacy or validity of a particular argument or statement. So we're trying to work through some of that. I'm trying to give you some practice doing that, and I think you're doing a good job. You need to know that, and uh, my intention here in this first section of their class, not to hammer you, but just to expose you to the challenges and difficulties of these elements. So do the exercises here, and when we get into some of the things in the next week or so, I'm going to probably try to have some Zoom experience with you. And through Moodle, there's a mechanism by which we can all get together on the same screen and chat and visit. And I'm going to have hopefully a chalkboard here. I can diagram some things for you, and that will be fun. But your textbook, and I like this textbook for this reason, he gets a little on the scary side for just a couple of sections here, but he diagrams things very well. So that's very helpful. And if you just go slow and you pay attention, one of the challenges that I was chatting with a student the other day, and one of the challenges is that they're rushing through it. You can't do that with logic. You have to really take your time, and you have to read it slow, go back over it so that you're familiar with these terms and the syllogistic structure and things of that nature. What is a counterintuitive example and things of that nature. Just so you're familiar with those terms, and that when folks wield them, you're not the deer in the headlights, if you'll be so kind. So, if you have any questions, drop me an email. But I think you're going to get through this week in good shape. Just go slow, read it carefully, and I will be talking with you soon. Bye now.